Our last speaker tonight is Lוי קופר, Dr. Lוי קופר. I think that one of the major challenges that we face is the development of young generation. Our field requires years of study and determination, and nevertheless, nothing is promised at the end. So I'm therefore very pleased that the conference program includes a very promising cadre of talented young scholars. One of them, Dr. Lוי קופר, stands out as one of these promising young scholars. He always succeeds to surprising us with unconventional topics. Lוי focuses on Hasidism and Halakha. He tries to connect between them by identifying familiar Hasidic ideas in the Hasidic ruling of Hasidic authorities. Recently, Lוי is working on the Hasidic code of the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, Admor HaZaken, that was published by his sons after his death, Shulchan Aruch Harav. In his work, Lוי attempts to characterize Jewish legal codes of the 18th century and to connect them to the contemporary European legal codes, such as Code Napoleon. This evening lecture is a byproduct of his research. He will analyze how Jews were portrayed in art in the Napoleonic period and what does it tell us about the legal status.
Good evening. Allow me to thank the organisers of the conference for giving me this opportunity to share my latest research, particularly in front of so many of my teachers and mentors over the years. It's a very big honour, and I'm looking forward to the next 2 days of learning and enrichment together with everybody. Our conference this year focuses on the interaction between law, technology and science and knowledge. We know that a concept like technology is relative to its time. In the end of the 15th century, the printing press was the height of technology. By the end of the 18th century, lithography was the innovative way to disseminate knowledge. And nowadays, while the electronic book has not replaced the printed book, when we publish articles, we're more concerned about getting a PDF of the article that we can share with our colleagues rather than 20 off-prints. This evening I'd like to go back to the brief but significant period when Napoleon changed the face of the world. Napoleon's military and political career famously and forcibly spread Enlightenment and French Revolution ideas across Europe. From a legal perspective, this included new laws, notions of codification, and more broadly, the promise of rights, civil liberties, freedom of worship, and equality before the law. The most formidable achievement was, of course, the 1804 Code Civil de Français, later renamed and better known as Code Napoleon. The printed word and visual arts were not entirely new during this period, but scholars like Lynn Hunt have demonstrated the critical role that new printing technologies played in precipitating the French Revolution and entirely changing the way people thought and how they felt, how people perceived and even empathized with people who were different to them. Epistolary novels, newspapers, pamphlets, visual artwork reproduced in the form of prints, lawyers' accounts and other treaties played significant roles in creating mimetic capital and shaping public opinion. With this in mind, I'd like to look at Napoleonic visual artwork that featured Jews. and try to read the artist's narrative while considering the contemporary legal situation. My contention this evening is that the artwork consistently depicts Jews in a legal context and with objects that are symbolic of law. After looking at a selection of pieces, I will consider whether we can discern a central theme that unites the different artistic expressions. At the outset, let me share with you 3 methodological considerations that guide my research. First, my focus this evening is not on law on the books, nor law in action. I'm not asking what did Napoleon legislate, nor am I asking how that legislation actually affected lives. Rather, I'm interested in legal narrative. What are the artists saying about law in their creative work? Second, Napoleon encouraged a new artistic style known as Empire-style art. Napoleon was well aware of the power of the arts to communicate and fashion narrative. Empire-style art is open to criticism for its unabashed partisanship and its bold attempt to fashion the Napoleonic myth. While art scholars may question the value of the works, from the perspective of the historian, Empire-style art broadcasts a visual language that is relatively accessible and unambiguous. So even if you were sick the day they taught art history when you were in yeshiva, you can still read Empire-style artwork. Third, I'll only look at art that was current with events. Art created at a later time, like this piece in the United States House of Representatives, provides a window into the legacy of historical events, but doesn't tell us about the contemporary narrative. I don't think this is a difficult point to accept when we look at the other bas-reliefs in the House of Representatives. The artistic representatives of Jews and Napoleon can be divided into 2 categories. The first category focuses on art that depicts religious groups, including Jews. The second category deals with art where Jews are the subject. A subclass of this second category features artwork of Napoleon's Sanhedrin in session. These drawings generally fit the themes I will discuss this evening, but the drawings of the Sanhedrin also reflect competing narratives as to the nature and purpose of this unique legal body. Consequently, art of the assembled Sanhedrin should be dealt with separately, and I won't discuss it this evening. In 1798, General Bonaparte issued a proclamation to his troops who were bound for Egypt. He began by reminding them about the importance of their campaign as part of the economic war against England. Napoleon then related to the local Muslim population that the soldiers were about to encounter, explaining a few tenets of Islam and giving instruction as to how the locals were to be treated. I quote, "Behave to them as you behave to the Jews, to the Italians," referring to the Italian Jews and to the Catholics encountered during the Italian campaigns of the French Revolutionary War against the First Coalition. In Napoleon's eyes, cunning military strategy, gallant bravery on the battlefield, and eventual victory against the enemy need not entail disrespect and incivility. Thus, on the eve of the Egyptian campaign, Napoleon urged his troops, "Pay respect to their muftis and their imams as you did to the rabbis and the bishops. Extend to the ceremonies prescribed by the Quran and the mosques the same toleration which you showed to synagogues, to the religion of Moses and Jesus Christ." Contemporary memoirs of Italian Jews vividly recall the respect and toleration that Napoleon's conquering forces accorded them. Alas, the reality experienced by the Egyptian Muslim population was a far cry from Napoleon's lofty declarations. Thus, the French response to the bloody revolt of Cairo included desecration of holy sites. As one Muslim chronicler described, "Then those wild goats," referring to the French, "rode into the mosque on horses, and the French trod in the mosque with their shoes, carrying swords and rifles. Then they scattered in its courtyard its main praying areas and tied their horses to the Qibla. They ravaged the students' quarters and pools, smashing the lamps and chandeliers and breaking up the bookcases of the students and scribes. They plundered whatever they found in the mosques. They treated the books and Quranic volumes as trash, throwing them on the ground, stamping on them with their feet and shoes. Furthermore, they soiled the mosque, blowing their spit in it, pissing and defecating in it. They guzzled wine and smashed the bottles in the central court and other parts. And whoever they happened to meet in the mosque, they stripped. They are the enemies of the religion. The discrepancy between the stated ideals and the facts on the ground are not so surprising, but they need not detain us this evening. I point out the chasm in order to remind us that we are investigating legal narrative rather than law on the books and law in action. The religious tolerance expressed by General Napoleon continued as the first policies of First Consul Napoleon following the coup that brought him to power in November 1799. Soon after the coup, Napoleon rolled back the harsh anti-clerical stance of the French Revolution. Christian clergy who had been detained were released, and Napoleon repealed regulations that had closed the churches in order to prevent Mass from being said. The spirit of these events is depicted in a print from a woodcut entitled Liberté de Culte, Freedom of Worship, that appeared in January 1800. On the back of the print, there are two texts. The first text is an anonymous poem celebrating the recent decree and trumpeting Napoleon's promotion of religious freedom. The poem is clear that while the specific context was Catholicism, the policies of First Consul Napoleon were for all religions, including Jews. The second text on the back of the print is a circular signed by the Minister of Police, Fouché, clarifying the government's intentions. Once again, the specific circumstance was Catholicism, yet the circular mentions the broader implications that all religions are free and equal. I'll presently return to this print, but first let me point out that the print has a strikingly similar sibling, about 1.5 years its junior, precipitated by another legislative event. In July 15th, 1801, Napoleon's representatives signed a concordat with the emissaries of Pope Pius VII. According to the agreement, Catholicism was recognized as the religion of the majority of French citizens, but not the religion of the French state. The concordat and subsequent French legislation paved the way for religious freedom in France. The outcome of these legislative events was depicted in a hand-coloured print from an etching by an unknown artist. The two prints, and there's actually a third one that I've recently come across, are the work of different artists and were precipitated by different legislative moments. Yet the prints are patently similar and they both reflect a similar narrative, so I'll treat them together. Let me emphasize, both events, and hence both prints, were connected to changes in the legal status of the Catholic Church in France. Yet both cases, the artists grasped the opportunity for a broader statement about religion and religious freedom under Napoleon. The artists present 10 figures. The first figure is Napoleon, who stands on a mound towering above all the others. The other 9 figures are identified at the bottom with a key as different faiths. A Catholic bishop, a Quaker, a Jew, a Protestant minister, a kneeling good Chinese priest, a Greek Orthodox bishop, a Mexican worshipping the sun and representing religion in the Americas, a Muslim imam, and an idolater from India, probably indicating Hinduism. The figures are drawn to Napoleon and to the rays of light. The print bespeaks equality between the religions. No particular faith is privileged. The Jew is depicted as a bearded figure with his head covered and perhaps a prayer shawl draped over his hat. He holds large tablets. The writing on the tablets is unreadable except for the title that these are the tablets of Moses. The voice of the print broadcasts that the enlightened Napoleon allows people to steadfastly grasp an ancient legal text like the Jew with the tablets, regardless of religious affiliation. Napoleonic rule grants freedom of worship to all. The prints can be better understood when we contextualize them by considering other artwork of the period. Let me give you one example. A point of visual comparison might be a 1794 colour etching in honour of the inauguration of the religion of the Supreme Being, a new civic religion offered as a replacement for Catholicism and as an alternative to the religion of reason that the French Revolution had instituted in place of Catholicism. For instance, the Eye of Providence in a radiant triangle appears atop all three prints. The 1794 festival took place around a man-made mound in Paris. In the prints, Napoleon stands on such a mound. Atop the mound, a tree symbolizing liberty was planted. In the freedom of worship prints, a tree appears in the background. In the 1794 print, there are two tablets atop the mound representing the rights of man. In contrast, Napoleon permits the Jew to hold on to his tablets. Napoleon's freedom of religion has thus replaced the previous French Revolution religions. Let us now move on to the second category of artwork, art that focuses on Napoleon and the Jews. In 1806, a Parisian artist, Couchet, produced an engraving depicting the relationship between Napoleon and the Jews. The Jews are personified as a maiden holding the tablets. The central figure in the picture is Napoleon, who stands in front of a throne dressed in royal robes. In one hand, Napoleon displays a document entitled, you can't see it so well in the slide, Laws Given to Moses. Once again, a reference to Moses. It's unclear what Napoleon is doing with the law. Is he acknowledging Mosaic law, affirming it, or confiscating it? Napoleon benevolently looks down at the maiden as his extended hand seems to touch her arm. The maiden sits at Napoleon's feet with her arm outstretched. She looks up at the ruler longingly with her hand cocked. The posture of her hand is reminiscent of Michelangelo's Creation of Adam fresco. Thus, godlike Napoleon is granting the spark of life to the maiden. The maiden's eyes are prominently open as she looks up, undoubtedly a reconfiguration of the Christian ecclesia et synagoga motif. The allegorical synagoga representation shows the Jews as a maiden with her eyes covered and her head downcast. The eyes of Couchet's maiden are not dim. She is not blind to her saviour, not Christ, but Napoleon. Synagoga is also classically depicted holding the Old Testament in the form of a book or tablets that appear to be falling out of her hand or carried as a burden, often held upside down. In contrast, Couchet's maiden has the tablets by her side, placed the right way up. It's likely that Napoleon and Couchet were aware of the Ecclesia et Synagoga motif. Indeed, Napoleon recast the motif in a historic act in 1805. Only days before Napoleon was crowned King of Italy in the Milan Cathedral, he ordered the completion of the facade of the cathedral. Until this day, the central balcony of the facade is flanked by two women, secularized and libertarian depictions of Ecclesia and Synagoga. On the left, Ecclesia is cast as the Lady of Liberty, while on the right, Synagoga is no longer blindfolded and downcast as she proudly holds the tablets, also wearing priestly vestments. Returning to Couchet's print, Two bearded men bow before Napoleon. A third man, dressed in respectable clothing, with an unusual but distinct hat, looks towards the document in Napoleon's hand. This figure is reminiscent of a portrait of Rabbi Yosef David Zintheim, the president of Napoleon's Sanhedrin. Contemporaneous with Couché's print, but with a more specific focus, a die for a medallion commemorating the Sanhedrin was designed and cast. On the reverse, Napoleon holds two tablets before the ruler, almost kneeling, with a hand outstretched towards the tablets, is a barefoot, bearded Jew with a mop of hair and a horn protruding from his head. The bare left arm shows physical strength. Clothes are draped over the figure. The image is reminiscent of Michelangelo's Moses. Once again, the use of the tablet's imagery and Moses. Michelangelo's Moses clutches the tablets, keeping them close to his bosom and protecting them. On the medallion, the tablets are already in Napoleon's hand. It's unclear whether Napoleon has just received the tablets from the Jew or whether he is proffering them to the Jew, and scholars are divided on this point. The Sanhedrin was charged with the task of submitting responses regarding the interface between Jewish law and French law. Thus, the Moses-like Jew in the medallion may be submitting his law to Napoleon. Alternatively, the cowering Moses-like Jew may be submissively surrendering his ancient legal code to Napoleon. Indeed, elements within the French leadership hoped and planned for Jews to forsake Jewish law and take up French law as full citizens. A third possibility is that Napoleon is depicted granting the tablets, demonstrating the freedom of worship bestowed by his regime. Finally, the medallion may be suggesting a regeneration where God, like Napoleon, grants the Moses-like Jew a new law. As we have seen from the examples that I've shown you this evening, and these are only a selection of the artwork that I've found, the artistic representations consistently employed imagery that indicated Moses and the tablets. What's the significance of this artistic choice? In Jewish sources, the tablets are not known as of Moses. The term Luchot Moshe does not appear in the Bible. Let me suggest that the artist may be identifying the tablets as of Moses in a bid to contrast them with other sets of tablets of law that were prominent in early 19th century French awareness. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen from 1789 was a watershed moment in the history of rights. Soon after the Declaration's adoption by the National Assembly, Jean-Jacques François Le Barbier, a writer, illustrator and painter of French history, would produce what would turn out to be his most famous work, a painting of the Declaration. The picture is laden with symbolism that's beyond the scope today. In the present context, it would appear significant that the artist chose to present the 17 articles of the Declaration in the form of 2 tablets. A second set of relevant tablets was the 12 tablet tables, which served as the basis of Roman and therefore French law. In 1799, a government-sponsored work on the history of the Roman Republic was published, and this work included a drawing of the 12 tables. This brings us to paintings that depict Napoleon writing the code. There are few artistic representations of Napoleon writing the code. The most famous portrayal is this 1812 painting where Napoleon stands after a night writing the code. In the painting, the code, as we might well expect, is written on paper. This painting might be contrasted with an allegorical painting of Napoleon writing the code, stylus in one hand and holding a tablet in the other. Napoleon pauses to face viewers, even though it's clear that he is in the middle of writing, and the back of the tablet identifies the work as Code Napoleon. Thus, in French consciousness, foundational law presented in the form of tablets ancient Roman law in the form of 12 tables, or ancient Jewish law in the form of Moses' tablets. If the Napoleonic artists are truly comparing ancient Jewish law to ancient Roman law, then this is a double-edged sword. Ancient legal traditions are to be respected, yet the time has arrived for these laws to be updated. In 1789, the Declaration of Rights was presented as tablets, 2 new tablets to replace the 2 biblical tablets of Moses. Of course, Napoleon's great legislative endeavour, the 1804 Code, was a more comprehensive replacement of those ancient tablets. There were no Romans who held on to the 12 tables. Only one people continued to hold on to their hallowed tablets. In the spirit of freedom of worship, the artists had room for the tablets of Moses, yet it was the destiny of the enlightened legislator benefactor Napoleon to grant new tablets, Code Napoleon. As we have seen, Moses figures prominently in all the artwork. The prominence of Moses follows the nostalgic idea of ancient Jewish law as being a pure form of worship, as opposed to the rabbis and Talmudic law. This emphasis on Moses can be contrasted with an earlier depiction of freedom of worship that appears on a fascinating deck of cards produced in 1793. They don't call me croupier for nothing. The aim of the deck of cards was to reinforce French Revolution ideals through everyday items. The court cards also provided an opportunity to tear down the privileged classes. Thus, the new picture cards needed to undergo a facelift. The kings were replaced with spirit, queens with liberty, jacks with equality. The deposed royals were each pictured with a personification of one aspect of the value. Each card was decorated with symbolic images and words. The card that interests us is the former Queen of Hearts, a female figure with the words Liberté d'écoute written below her. At her feet, 3 books are gathered representing 3 religions: Talmud, the Quran, and the Gospel. In 18th century France, the Talmud, that is the law of the rabbis, reflected all that was wrong with Judaism. While the former Queen of Hearts is replaced by freedom of worship, she still associates Judaism with the Talmud. In contrast, the Napoleonic artwork consistently chose an image that conjured up more positive associations: Moses and the ancient law of Israel. Considering the artistic creations offers a particular narrative of Napoleon and the Jews. French visual arts express the connection between Napoleon and his Jewish subjects as an essentially legal relationship. Jews are depicted with the tablets in a conscious choice to use the ancient and foundational legal text in order to indicate religious affiliation. The intended audience of these artistic creations is unclear. It's doubtful whether Napoleon, the ruler of the expanding French Empire, was truly in conversation with the minuscule Jewish community. One possibility is that Napoleon was fashioning a narrative of religious tolerance that went beyond the Jews. Certainly, the freedom of worship prints that feature Jews placed them on par with other religions. In 1816, while exiled on St. Helena, Napoleon would look back and cast his actions in this light. His personal physician, Dr. Barry O'Mara, recorded that he asked Napoleon, I quote, about his reasons for having encouraged the Jews so much. Napoleon responded that his goal was to make them become good citizens and conduct themselves like the rest of the community. To be sure, Napoleon stood to benefit from his plan as he continued. By this I gained many soldiers. Besides, I should have drawn great wealth to France, as the Jews were very numerous and would have flocked to a country where they enjoyed such superior privileges. But alongside the utilitarian angle, Napoleon saw Jews' rights as part of a broader picture, and the conversation turned in that direction. I wanted to establish a universal liberty of conscience. My system was to have no predominant religion, but to allow perfect liberty of conscience and of thought to make all men equal, whether Protestant, Catholics, Mahometans, deists, or others. But Napoleon's St. Helena narrative does not explain the events and the artwork where Jews are given particular attention. More importantly, Napoleon's religious tolerance does not appear to have been born from ideology. Rather, his professions of open-mindedness towards religion were driven by a utilitarian approach that was facilitated by a lack of conviction for the importance of faith. In 1800, Napoleon stated, "It was by making myself Catholic that I ended the war in Vendée," referring to the uprising by the Catholics in Western France. "By making myself a Mussulman, I established myself in Egypt. By making myself ultramontane," that is a supporter of the Pope's power, "that I won over the minds of the Italians. If I had to govern a nation of Jews, I would rebuild the Temple of Solomon." Napoleon proudly described himself as a human chameleon, a reference to Woody Allen's Zelig, blending in with the surrounding and becoming whoever he is around. But Napoleon never had an opportunity to govern a nation of Jews. So why do they feature disproportionately in Napoleonic artwork? What utilitarian gain was there to be had by the emperor and by extension by his artists? It appears that the issue at stake was broader than Napoleon the Jews and further reaching than Napoleon's attitude towards religious freedom. The French ruler was focused on Napoleon and the law. Ronald Schechter questioned whether French writers in general and Napoleon specifically were interested in Jews as Jews, or whether Jews served as totems for considering broader issues, man, citizen, and the like. Schechter argued that French Revolution thinkers used Jews. Building on Schechter's work, I am suggesting that the artwork is particularly focused on law and legality. Napoleonic art used the Jews to talk about law. Jews therefore were an object, a showground where the sovereign could demonstrate his respect for ancient law, his juridical authority to abrogate that law, and his commitment to legal rights. The artwork examined here suggests that Napoleon's artists depicted Jews while considering a broader narrative of legality. This message may have been particularly important for Napoleon, whose very throne was established by a coup in legally questionable circumstances. The artwork had a strong element of narrative formation. Napoleon's regime is legally just. The enlightened ruler affords rights and liberties to all his subjects. Divine Napoleon is the new lawgiver. Let me conclude by noting that the relationship between law and the arts can take various forms. In this case, art is pressed into the service of law, yet art fills a function that law cannot achieve. It creates a narrative of legality that allows law to function. Thank you.